Hello and welcome to this Quaker Focus broadcast, which focuses on the testimony of sustainability. I'm Michael Winter, and it's good to be back introducing this program after my accident just after Christmas. I'm pleased to have with me Diana Madgen, who is a well-known conservationist in Christchurch, and she has written extensively about gardens, the natural environment and local history. We're also joined by Graham French, former lawyer, who has a long association with the local vegetarian centre in Christchurch and the community house. Finally, we're delighted to welcome Rosalie Jenkin, self-proclaimed artist and bicycle lover, who's a coordinator of Generation Zero, an organisation of young people whose purpose it is to drastically reduce carbon pollution. We're talking about sustainability today. The New Zealand Quaker website summarise sustainability as being about living so others can follow. And local sustainability engineer Dr. John Peat expressed it as a situation where, quote, all people have their basic needs satisfied so that they can live in dignity in healthy communities while having the minimum adverse impact on natural systems both now and in the future. I'd like to start with you, Di, by asking you, why is sustainability important to you as a Quaker?
Well, sustainability to me means trying to be consistently aware of what sustains and is kind to our little planet, and to be principled about how I live my life, what's good and healthy, and bettering about how I live my life. We used to say, some of us still do, you've only got one life, so live it. And that's a bit me for me. I think we've only got one planet, so how do we protect it and enrich it and ourselves in our lifetime? Right now, I'm making a focus on plastic, the eradication of the huge, toxic, floating death camp the size of France that floats in the Pacific Ocean. Sir David Attenborough brought that home in the Blue Planet 2 film, and his crew finding albatrosses trying to feed their chicks plastic waste. As he says, the chicks are going to starve and die, and we humans make a consistent input into their death. I decided the supermarket is the best place to start. It's saturated in plastic. I said to my friend Carol, I found some tomatoes on special, but they're wrapped in plastic. She says, just take them to the checkout and respectfully take them out of their packing and leave the packing on the counter. So that's what I did, and it was perfectly graciously received, because there are many good workers at supermarkets who themselves support these efforts. I don't line my rubbish bin with plastic. I line it with a biodegradable bag made of corn flour, I think, that breaks down. And I don't use baking paper because it doesn't break down. Takeaway coffee means take my own cup with me to take away. Ask takeaway food places, I think, how they sort their waste, because some of them have a very questionable commitment to environment. And take it home yourself if you're not satisfied. I think that's the way to go. If you're not satisfied, if you've got a query, we've got our own good waste collection in Christchurch, so take it home. I find that the stronger and better I get at dealing with plastic, the braver I can be in suggesting no plastic to other people. Like the fellow ahead of me in the queue at the supermarket who had one toothbrush, and the attendant said, would you like a bag? And he said, yes. So I just had to quietly tap his shoulder once he got out and said, would you like to put the toothbrush in your pocket and I'll put your plastic bag in the recycle bin. He hadn't just thought about it, it was automatic. And I was thinking about where this plastic goes, and now we have all these fantastic films showing us the density of plastic in water systems and especially in the ocean. So our own dolphins here can mistake a plastic supermarket bag for squid, their food, and eat it, which of course leads to a horrid death. So there are a lot. I've now just got to the stage where I'm making plastic my mission. So there are lots of things like drinking straws and coffee cups and supermarket bags and plastic packaging, such as cling wrap. They're all convenience items that we could change our habits with. We don't need to use them made of plastic. Some we don't need to use at all. The other thing I think is this, there's all sorts of fads. The current madness is to do away with clotheslines and use clothes dryers. So when we shifted from the red zone here in Christchurch to a new warmly insulated house, we didn't reinstall the clothes dryer. In the winter, clothes dry on the banister railing. There's only 2 of us, no children now, so there's no need to use electricity for drying when we have the wind and the sun. There's so much pressure these days to do away with old-fashioned ideas so that the garden or the house looks better, because it's fashionable to look good, and some houses do not even allow clotheslines. So that's pretty well my little mission at the moment, and I find that I'm getting more verbal and stronger and less anxious about speaking up. So I just had the thought today, thinking about this, that I could look at our community and see if the whole community that I live in could become plastic avengers.
You're talking about the clothesline. It reminds me, I heard on the radio the other day that someone started marketing clotheslines in the States as linear solar evaporators.
Oh, well, I probably do better with that than
yeah, they're doing quite well. Yeah. Rosalie, tell me about your how sustainability impacts on your life.
Well, I guess my big focus within this topic is climate change, mostly. I like to think that I do my bit as an individual in other ways as well. For instance, I choose to ride my bike as many places as I can instead of driving, and encouraging, public and active transport as much as possible. But for me, climate change is probably the most urgent sort of topic under the umbrella of sustainability, and I guess it impacts me in many ways, because it sort of makes me think about the big picture stuff in a more holistic view of the world. And I think when you start trying to trace back the products you consume and your actions to see what effect they're having later down the track, but also like where things have come from, what impact has been already created from everything that we consume and produce. It does it has an impact in that it does make you feel more connected with the world around you, I think, and also just a sense that you're part of a much bigger thing, and it's not just your little patch, but it's how your little patch interacts with everyone else's little patches. So I guess it's a long way of saying it broadens my thinking and makes me feel more connected with the rest of the world. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Generation Zero.
So Generation Zero is a youth-led climate advocacy group. So we're are solely focused on reducing New Zealand's carbon emissions and getting our country on track to be carbon neutral, because we feel that we're not doing our bit currently, and that in terms of long-term sustainability for ourselves as a species, but also many others on the planet, it's crucial that we start taking urgent action now. It should have been happening decades ago, but we're hopeful that it's not too late and that we've got things that we can do, mostly that the government needs to do to make it easier for ourselves as individuals to do. So we're calling on our government to put in place a climate law at the moment. That's the big thing on the cards.
We are a bit slow to do things, aren't we? I remember in the 70s there was the book by the Club of Rome, Limits to Growth, which talked about how soon we were going to run out of metals and oil and stuff. And it's taken a long time for the penny to drop, I think.
Yes, it really has.
Graham, how does sustainability thinking affect you?
Well, I try to live as simply as possible. I have had a car. At the moment I haven't a car, and so I've been biking everywhere, but whenever I am going around, I try to pick up recyclables, and particularly plastics and things that might get into the waterways. Now, Quakers are not unique in their concern for sustainability, but probably if you were to look on both the New Zealand Quaker website and the UK Quaker websites, you'd find a huge amount of material on sustainability. And this morning I was looking at the British Quaker website, and there's an interesting section. If you Google Quakers in Britain living sustainably, they have a sustainability toolkit which lists 47 actions that you can take to live a more sustainable life. Some of those things are more appropriate for a group like a church or a club relating to buildings and grounds and so on. Some are basic things. And Quakers have a book called Advices and Queries, and they're like homilies, I suppose. And I'm quoting from number 42. Try to live simply, a simple lifestyle freely chosen as a source of strength. Do not be persuaded into buying what you cannot afford. We do not own the world, and its riches are not ours to dispose of at will. Work to ensure that our increasing power over nature is used responsibly with reverence for life. And they had this acronym, LOAF, which relates to food. Ideally you would buy food that's locally produced, animal friendly, to keep the right order, locally produced, organically grown, animal friendly and fairly traded. One of my passions is vegetarianism and veganism, so I preach this whenever I can, probably to the annoyance of some of my fellow Quakers. But I would encourage people to consider at least having meat-free days, even if they aren't prepared to go the full hog, if I could use that expression, and be vegetarians or vegans. I'd also encourage people to look at the film Cowspiracy. You can Google that again. This makes a case for vegetarianism and veganism and argues that animal agriculture is the primary source of environmental destruction. Now, the science of that film has been criticised, and the makers of the film have rebutted the criticism, so I leave it to people to follow that up and decide for themselves. But a sequel to that film was a film called What the Health, which promoted a vegan lifestyle on the grounds that not only was a plant-based diet healthier for the individual, but it was also much healthier for the planet, because if you look at what's been happening in the Canterbury Plains, the huge amount of irrigation, the import of palm kernel to feed dairy cows. It was quite interesting. A couple of years ago I went to a talk on dairying, and this farmer had reduced the size of his herd he found that it actually was more economical. There were larger profits to be had with a smaller herd. He didn't have to rely on imported palm kernel, and it was a healthier, more lucrative operation. Now, quite by chance this morning, I was listening to a program on BBC4 called Costing the Earth about superwood. And one of the things that I've observed in the Christchurch rebuild is the amount of steel and concrete that's gone to the new buildings. If you take the Justice Precinct as an example, a huge amount of steel went into that. Now, this program was interviewing people in Finland and Sweden who were working on a bioeconomy, and in fact in Finland there was this biorefinery, and they were making film from wood, and they were talking about cross-laminated timber buildings. Apparently in the UK there are 500 cross-laminated timber buildings. My understanding is there's one laminated timber building in Christchurch post-quakes, but a huge amount of steel has gone to most of the buildings so that they're not really environmentally friendly.
Thank you. So one of the things that you mentioned with your personal lifestyle is the idea of simplicity. So it links back to one of the other of our testimonies that we dealt with earlier on in this series. And I'm wondering, it sounds to me that a lot of these things that people do towards sustainability are about doing without. Where's the joy in all this?
Well, I thought when I became a vegan, and to begin with I was a raw vegan, that I'd be living on nothing but sort of carrot and celery sticks, but far from it. I don't know whether I can plug places or people, but I found at the Lotus Heart restaurant they had these incredible raw cheesecakes and things, so it hasn't meant the sacrifice that I thought it would mean.
I'll just add to that as well. I think there's a benefit in simplicity and going without, as you put it, in the way that it forces you to slow down a bit. And I find that as a result of making choices that are, I suppose, more sustainable, I'm often forced to just take a bit more time out and put a little bit more effort into doing something instead of, just going down to the supermarket and buying whatever it is, or getting some new clothes, if it's sewing my own clothes from something that I've op-shopped, or just, going and doing some gardening and growing something instead of buying it from, probably somewhere across the other side of the world. These things do take a little bit more time and effort in planning, but it actually forces me to sort of slow down a bit, and I can be mindful in doing those activities and actually get enjoyment out of it. And for me, it's actually a way to de-stress. Sometimes I have to force myself to take that time out, and by sort of injecting your life with these sorts of choices, you can get that time to yourself just to be a bit more mindful. So I would say that's how I get joy out of being sustainable.
So there's that thing about slowing down, stepping off the rat race sort of feeling.
Definitely, yeah.
Di, have you got anything to add to this?
I'm not at all good at slowing down. I'm 71, and if anything, I've speeded up. So much and all as I would like to slow down, there's a lot of stuff I want to get hold of and do before I'm too old to do it. So I don't have quite the same approach. I do, however, did have to make my own garden, another garden, when we lost our house and my husband had a stroke, and we came to live on an old bit of farmland. So after a few years now, just 4 years, I'm absolutely overwhelmed with fruit and vegetables, and then I make lots of pickles and I freeze stuff, and so as I've always done. So I grew up on a farm, made food, so that's very satisfying. And I make my own compost, and that's very satisfying. Sorts of the homemade stuff, hanging on to that, still being able to do that stuff is very pleasing, and I can some other people who've lost that, young people especially, I can be supportive in getting them going again. But I think the big thing that is that in doing this stuff out of the the upbringing that I had, I now have the images brought to me by the wisdom of excellent documentaries on the television, and I can visualize what is important to me. I can visualize starvation. I can see it better than I could when I was growing up with little imaging. So the images of what I want to be working for, reducing poverty, living sustainably, not chopping all the bloody forests down, doing all those sorts of things, not filling up the air and the sea with plastics. Those things are in my head when I'm doing something. So it's connected. It's like it's my own film rolls on while I'm living my life, and it's a new film from the one I grew up with because it's full of visuals. That's very helpful. I think that.
Thanks, Diane.
Yeah.
It's really interesting the way that ideas of sustainability and caring for the planet seem to leach into everything. There was a program I heard on national radio a few days ago where they were talking about the hospital service and how they are moving away from certain anaesthetics because other anaesthetics are more carbon friendly than the ones that they've used for ages. And who would think that by choosing a different anaesthetic, I'm being kinder to the planet? It's really interesting, some of these things. Yeah. Any other thoughts before we wind up? We're getting towards the end of our time.
One of the things that annoys me is waste. I think my mother grew up in the wartime London. You couldn't waste things then because you didn't have the resources, and I get annoyed at people who put things in the red bin that could be repurposed or reused, and people, and this is particularly true at a large charity where I volunteer, people who put in the yellow bin things which shouldn't be put in the yellow bin, including used nappies and so on. And I also, another gripe is seeing people watering the footpath.
Yes.
That whole thing about repurposing and reusing things. The old, I'm about the same age. I remember post-war London, and there was a big culture of mending things. People don't mend things anymore. It's disposable.
So there was a program on the radio not so long ago about this woman who'd set up an organisation in Scotland, which I think now has taken on in other parts of the world, where they actually encourage people to mend things and help them do that. But this whole idea of planned obsolescence is something which we need to fight against.
Yeah, because many young people don't realise that planned obsolescence means that when you can get something to replace what's worn out, so you think, or you don't, it's not worth the money to get it mended, it's going to go into the landfill. It's going to go into the bottom of the sea. It's going to go somewhere where it shouldn't be. So that's the end of what you're saying, Graham, that kind of, where do we put this when we get something new? Where do we put the old?
And not only that, the materials that they're made of, in the case of electronics and so on, there are some really valuable materials like rare earths and so on that are depleted if you throw them away. Yeah.
We haven't got on to micro beads and the fact that people are going to end up killing themselves because all the fish have sort of...
That's a subspecies of plastic, though.
Yes,
it's almost covered with plastics. Okay, I think we're getting pretty well there now. I'd like to thank you, Rosalie, Diana and Graham. It brings us to the end of our series of programs on the Quaker Testimonies of Simplicity, Peace, Integrity, Community, Equality and Sustainability. I'd like to invite you to join us at Quaker Meeting, which takes place every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. at the Quaker Centre, 217 Ferry Road. We're also holding the first of our monthly series of Quaker forums on topical and important issues. The first one is to discuss what is the purpose of a city, and is introduced by Neville Riley, former ambassador to Afghanistan and currently Civil Defence Emergency Coordinator for Christchurch. This forum takes place at the Quaker Centre on Wednesday the 11th of April at 7:30 p.m. Our next programme will be on Wednesday the 25th of April at 9 p.m, and I look forward to meeting you again then. Thank you.